Hey everybody, hope you're having a great day. Today we're going to spend a few minutes going over the pay yourself first strategy. You may have heard it been called the profit first strategy. I personally like pay yourself first better, so that's what we're going to talk about. We're going to do two things in this video. We're going to go over what is the pay yourself first methodology and strategy, and then I'm going to hop into sequence so I can show you how to actually execute it yourself if this is what you want to do. So let's get started. Taking a look here, we'll see a diagram of the two different principles, kind of the more typical way that most people tend to spend, which in the visual we call the broke people strategy, and then the pay yourself first strategy. Now, looking at the broke people strategy, you'll see one thing. When we get our income, for most of us, it goes directly to our checking account. And from there, we spend on expenses, debt payments, spending, luxuries, fun, and then maybe if something's left over, maybe you'll save that last amount of money. That's why most people don't save too much. Now, the power of pay yourself first is simply taking that saving that is often at the end and bringing it up to do the first thing that you do when you get new money. So when your income comes in, automatically putting some of it aside to save, whether that's through the 401k, Roth, an emergency fund, you name it, and then letting the rest of the money be the bucket from which you pay your expenses, your debt payments, your spending, fun, etc. So let's hop into sequence so we can see how to actually build this ourselves. So looking at sequence in the playground here, as you've probably seen before, but if this is your first time looking at the playground environment, it's a little bit different than what you're used to. And the way we always want to start our sequences is we always need to add a port. Now, if you don't know what a port is simply the connection from your income into sequence. So maybe you have a traditional job and you're getting paid every other week or once a month, whatever it may be, great. Maybe you have 3 different incomes and some freelance work and rental income, great. Every single income that you have, you'll want to create a port because that creates the entry channel for that money to get into sequence so that we can start to make our rules. So for this, I'm going to say John, salary. Perfect. And again, as you may have seen before, in the playground, we're always going to add a random number here, so you don't need to worry about it too much. But in this case, let's say that John is making $10,000 a month. Wonderful. Now, as we talked about beforehand, most people would just simply get that deposited into their checking account, spend, and hopefully save some at the end of the month. But what Pay Yourself First talks about is instead literally paying yourself first. So I like to use a pod, and you could sync this up to an existing bank account or checking account or savings account or investment account. I like to do a pod personally just because it allows me to be a little bit more arm's length, and it's not a fund that I can easily check on in my banking app. So it feels like I don't even need to worry about the money. It's just going to continue to grow and grow and grow without me even thinking about it. So I'm going to create a pod, and I'm going to call this Pay Myself First. And there we have it. Okay. Now, I am going to also sync up my checking and savings because that's the most common. And you may have multiple checking accounts, multiple savings accounts. Maybe you only have one, no problem. But I'm going to add those just so that we can see how this works. So now that we have the salary port, we've got my pod for Pay Myself First and my checking and savings account. I need to create the rule. And I simply do that by clicking the plus button, dragging over to Pay Myself First, and I get the opportunity to decide what type of rule I want to create. I can trigger it by any time that new funds come in, this rule runs, or I can do it by a specific date. For today's purposes, we're just going to go with incoming funds as a trigger. Here we go. So at this point, it auto selects transfer percentage of funds, which I could do. Maybe it's 5%, 10%, 20%, you name it. Or if I want to, I can even transfer a fixed amount. So in John's case here, let's say that he wants to save $100 per month. Perfect. With this rule, it allows me to instantly send $100 over to that pod, Pay Myself First. But what I'm also going to do is I'm going to add another action because I want the rest of the money to still go to my checking account. So by clicking the plus sign, I get to see transfer percentage of the remainder, and I'm going to transfer 100% of the remainder, and I get to select which account. And I'm going to say my checking account. When I click save, it's now created those two rules for me. So pay yourself first simply means getting that savings done immediately so that you can spend the rest of the money on everything else that you need to do each month. I hope you have a wonderful day and keep saving.